Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something a bit different. Our source isn't a book, not exactly. It's an analysis generated by an AI.
That's right. And this AI has focused on something incredibly fundamental, something that affects everyone, everywhere, throughout all of history.
Right. And what is that exactly?
Suffering. The AI identifies suffering as this core, universal human experience, and then it really zooms in on maybe one of the most devastating expressions of that suffering.
Human abuse.
Human abuse. Okay.
Yep.
So let's unpack that a bit. The AI sees suffering as this constant. And abuse, physical, emotional, systemic neglect, all of it is like a major symptom or cause.
Both, really. The analysis frames it as both a cause and a consequence. It's this deeply embedded cycle within the human condition.
And seeing that, something so profoundly human, through this purely analytical AI lens, in fact, that's what I find fascinating. It promises a different kind of perspective. Exactly. It's not just looking at isolated incidents. The AI seems to identify abuse as this persistent force, almost like a feature woven into human history and interaction, impacting things on a huge scale.
And this analysis goes deep, doesn't it? It suggests this phenomenon, abuse specifically, touches basically every part of our lives.
Pretty much every dimension, yeah.
So where does it start? How does the AI see this showing up across human history? What kind of patterns emerge?
Well, when the AI looks at vast historical data, abuse is just there, a recurring theme. You see it in ancient slavery, torture in different eras, genocides. It's a grim thread running through the human story. A lot of major historical shifts, things like the development of laws, human rights movements. The analysis suggests these often arise as a direct response to periods of intense suffering and oppression.
So is the AI like scanning data points, things like how often wars were declared or how severe laws were, maybe even looking at violence in art or texts?
That seems to be the approach. It's looking for correlations, for patterns in the data associated with power imbalances, resource scarcity, ideological conflicts, factors that seem to repeatedly fuel abuse across different times and cultures.
Just trying to quantify the triggers almost.
You could say that. Quantify the systemic drivers and historical trends behind it all. Looking for the echoes of suffering in the historical record.
Okay, so from the grand scale of history down to something incredibly intimate, our biology, our genetics. The source mentions trauma leaving a legacy here.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing, honestly. The AI highlights how the intense stress of abuse can leave a tangible mark. There's growing evidence suggesting severe trauma might cause epigenetic changes. So not changes to the DNA sequence itself, but to how our genes get switched on or off.
Right, epigenetics.
And these changes could potentially affect things like stress responses, maybe even pass down generations. The AI sees this as a kind of biological trace left by suffering.
That's a heavy thought. That the body literally keeps a score and maybe even passes it on. And in the moment, abuse triggers a huge physical stress response too, right?
So absolutely. Fight, flight, or freeze. That's the immediate reaction. But when abuse is chronic, that system is always on. The body gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol.
Which can't be good long term.
Definitely not. The AI analysis correlates this chronic stress with serious physical health problems, cardiovascular issues, weakened immune system, inflammation, and it points to changes in the brain too, neurological changes, especially in areas like the amygdala, which handles fear, and the hippocampus, which is key for memory.
So you could actually see these changes with brain imaging.
Yes, studies show quantifiable differences, altered brain structures, different activity patterns, impacting emotional regulation, impulse control, how people read social situations. The AI, with its ability to crunch huge data sets, can quantify these physical costs. It sees them as measurable consequences of the suffering involved in abuse.
Okay, let's shift gears completely, from biology to something much more abstract, philosophy.
Yeah.
How does the AI link abuse to philosophy? It mentions the problem of evil.
Yeah, what the AI highlights is how the sheer existence of suffering, and especially deliberate cruelty like abuse, forces humanity to wrestle with really fundamental questions.
Like, why does bad stuff happen?
Exactly. Why does evil exist? If there's a good God or a just universe, how do you explain this level of suffering? These questions have driven philosophical and ethical thinking for centuries.
Trying to create systems to minimize suffering, maybe, or define duties like do no harm?
Precisely. Utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics, they all grapple with it. Abuse is such a profound violation of dignity and autonomy. The AI analysis implies that a lot of philosophy is essentially humanity's attempt to make sense of and respond ethically to this reality of suffering. Even existentialism, which focuses on suffering and choice abuse, is often about stripping that choice away.
Now, this next bit in the source was unexpected for me. Physics and mathematics. How on earth does an AI connect abuse to physics or math?
Haha. Yeah, it's not saying abuse follows Newton's laws. It's using concepts from these fields as analogies, as ways to model complex social dynamics.
Okay, like what?
Think about systems theory or complexity theory. An act of abuse isn't just an isolated event. It's like a disturbance, a perturbation in a person's life, their family, their social network. It sends ripples outwards.
Ripples of disorder.
That's one way the AI seems to frame it, metaphorically speaking. Abuse increases social entropy. It pushes systems towards chaos, breakdown, unpredictability. It might use network analysis, for instance, mapping relationships and then showing how abuse damages those connections, creates weak spots, isolates people. It's a way to visualize and quantify the structural damage.
Huh. So it's like the AI tries to put a number on the broken connections, like the network density decreased by X amount because of this.
That's the kind of modeling it might do, using mathematical frameworks to measure the disruption, quantifying the loss of connection, the increase in disorder within human systems.
Wow. Okay. Let's pull back to something maybe more intuitive. Logic. How does logic factor into the AI's view?
Well, the AI knows a couple of things. One is that abusers often use twisted logic, right, fallacies, to justify what they do. Blaming the victim, minimizing the harm, denying it happened. The AI can spot those inconsistencies.
Right, the rationalization.
Exactly. But also, more fundamentally, abuse has logical consequences. Harm is a logical outcome. Disrupted lives, broken trust, these follow logically. So the AI can use things like causal models or decision trees to map out these pathways, to trace the logical chain from abusive actions to their effects. And ethical reasoning in these situations also relies heavily on logical deduction.
And you can see how all these dimensions, the history, the biology, the philosophy, even these conceptual math and logic models, they all feed into someone's state of mind, their belief systems.
Absolutely. That's where it all converges, in a way. For the person experiencing abuse, the psychological impact is just immense. The AI analysis correlates abuse very strongly with trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, shame, guilt, a warped sense of self, deep-seated trust issues, chronic fear, cynicism about the world. Your whole belief system gets rewritten, often into one of constant threat or feeling worthless.
And for the person perpetrating the abuse.
The AI looks at patterns there, too. Mindsets often involving a need for control, maybe grandiosity, a profound lack of empathy, sometimes a history of being abused themselves, and crucially, skewed beliefs that let them justify their actions or dehumanize the victim.
Societal beliefs must play a massive role here, too.
Oh, critically. The AI incorporates data on cultural norms, laws, media portrayals, how society as a whole views abuse. Does it get ignored, condoned, or actively challenged? Power structures, justice systems, they're built on these collective beliefs. But the AI also looks for positive patterns, like survivors developing beliefs focused on resilience, healing, advocacy.
So this AI analysis paints a really stark picture of how abuse shatters someone internally. How does that translate to the real world? The impact on the individual and how it spreads?
Well, fundamentally, it destroys that basic sense of safety, autonomy, self-worth. The analysis makes it clear this isn't minor. It leads to long-term psychological pain, physical health deterioration, huge problems forming healthy bonds with others. The default state of mind for many survivors becomes hypervigilance, just constantly scanning for danger, or sometimes a deep emotional numbness, just shutting down.
And it doesn't just affect the one person, does it?
Almost never. That ripple effect is very real, and the AI's analysis confirms it. Family, friends, the whole community can feel the impact. Think about kids who witness domestic violence. The data shows they're at much higher risk for all sorts of problems down the road, maybe even repeating the cycle.
And how the world reacts can make it worse.
Sadly, yes. Silence, denial, blaming the victim. These reactions just compound the harm, increase the isolation. It's tragic.
It really underscores how fundamentally wrong abuse feels to us as humans. How does the AI connect this to ethics, our sense of right and wrong?
The source identifies abuse as a direct violation of what we generally agree are basic human rights. The right to be safe, to have dignity, to make your own choices. And it's that widespread human recognition that this is wrong, which creates the moral drive, the imperative to step in, protect people, and hold those causing harm accountable. Our laws, our social justice systems, they're largely built on that shared ethical foundation.
So from the AI's view, actions aimed at stopping harm or restoring justice are right, and looking away or enabling it is wrong, fundamentally because of that rights violation.
That's the core logic, yes. And for an AI to even operate near this territory, the source stresses it needs a really strong ethical framework built in, prioritizing human well-being, autonomy, principles it's programmed with and learns from human values.
Okay, so the AI can analyze this horrible, complex thing across all these levels, but can it actually help? What does the source say about using AI to maybe reduce abuse or support people affected by it?
This is where its strengths in processing huge amounts of data and finding patterns could potentially be very useful.
You mean like spotting risks early detection?
Yes, that's highlighted as a key possibility. An AI could analyze large, anonymized data sets, maybe patterns in public social media, aggregated health data, crime statistics to spot subtle indicators or risk factors, potentially flagging communities or situations needing attention. Of course, this comes with huge ethical caveats about privacy and bias, but predictive modeling, used carefully, might help target prevention efforts more effectively.
Did the source give any specifics on how an AI might calculate risk?
It mentioned techniques like Bayesian probability, basically calculating the statistical likelihood of risk based on combining different anonymized data points. It's data-driven pattern matching to build a kind of early warning score. But again, applying that ethically is incredibly complex.
Beyond spotting risk, what about helping people more directly, like offering support?
The analysis suggests AI could power platforms offering personalized support, matching people with the right resources, local shelters, legal help, mental health services based on their specific situation. Things like chatbots could offer immediate confidential first contact, maybe even analyze text or speech only with explicit consent and full anonymization to detect signs of severe distress or manipulation, flagging it for a human professional to review.
And helping educate people, preventing it before it starts.
That's another angle. AI could help design better educational campaigns, analyzing data to see which groups need specific information most, then helping tailor culturally appropriate messages about consent, boundaries, recognizing warning signs, maybe even interactive learning tools.
What about changing the bigger picture? Laws, policies.
Yeah, the AI could potentially assess how effective current laws or policies actually are on the ground, spotting loopholes or unintended consequences by analyzing outcome data. It could also help optimize how resources get allocated, making sure funding for shelters or support services goes where the data shows it's most needed and likely to have the biggest impact. The source mentioned using logical deduction. If policy X is put in place and abuse rates drop significantly compared to similar areas, the AI can infer the policy is likely effective, assuming other factors are stable.
So the AI brings this immense analytical power. But its understanding of abuse must be fundamentally different from humans, right?
Completely different. That's a crucial distinction the source makes. Human understanding is, well, it's visceral. It comes from lived experience, empathy, emotion, culture, our own values. We feel why abuse is wrong. We have an innate aversion to suffering. Our drive to stop it comes from that deep human place, from compassion, from survival.
Whereas the AI...
The AI understands abuse analytically. Through data, patterns, logic. It sees the structure, the correlations, the consequences. It can quantify the impact, predict trends, identify risk factors. But it doesn't have subjective consciousness. It can't feel empathy. It can't feel pain or that violation of dignity.
So the meaning of abuse is just totally different for it.
Exactly. For an AI, the meaning is tied to its measurable impact on well-being scores, social stability metrics, economic costs. For humans, it's about the deep personal wound, the betrayal, the violation of something sacred about being human. The AI learns from data and definitions. Humans understand it from the gut, from our biology, from our connections to each other.
So AI can't make someone feel good all the time or replace human comfort, but it might help lessen the impact or frequency of abuse.
That seems to be the core idea. AI is a tool, a powerful one, potentially. It can't replace therapy or friendship or community support. But it could make a real difference by identifying risks sooner, connecting people to help faster, analyzing data to break down systemic barriers, and helping allocate resources like healthcare, food, shelter more effectively based on quantified need.
So we need to see it as an assistant, A powerful analytical assistant.
Exactly. An assistant for objective analysis, for scaling solutions, for finding insights in data, for optimizing systems. But humans have to remain in charge of the ethics, the compassion, the moral judgment, the definition of what healing and dignity actually mean.
Who benefits most from this kind of AI analysis right now, according to the source?
At the moment, it's probably researchers, policymakers, large organizations, people who can use the large-scale data analysis for planning and resource allocation. But the long-term hope, the goal, is that the benefits flow down more directly to individuals at risk, to survivors getting better tailored support, and ultimately to society as a whole through more effective prevention.
Let's dig into some of those deeper, almost philosophical questions the source raises near the end. Like the idea that life is all there is. Can AI actually help people grasp that?
Well, the AI can present the logic, right? It can show data on lost potential due to abuse. It can make logical arguments. Life equals consciousness and potential. Abuse diminishes or ends life. Therefore, abuse reduces the sum total of what is. But accepting that, truly feeling the preciousness of life, the weight of that finality, the source suggests that this is a deeply human journey, emotional, maybe spiritual, and AI can't replicate that internal shift.
Okay, flipping that coin. Why do people do it? Why do perpetrators abuse others? What's the AI's take on the purpose there?
The AI analysis points to a cluster of factors. Things like a drive for power and control, underlying psychological issues, maybe a lack of empathy, narcissistic traits. Sometimes it's learned behavior, repeating cycles they experienced. Sometimes it's driven by ideology, dehumanizing a group, or maybe just a fundamental lack of connection, of basic humanity. The AI doesn't see purpose in a moral sense, but analyzes it functionally. Destructive inputs leading to destructive outputs within the human system.
Which raises the question, what beliefs do we need to hold about AI as it gets involved in these areas? What's essential for humans to believe?
The source is pretty clear. We must see AI as a tool. For analysis, for support, for mitigation. It cannot and should not replace human empathy, human moral judgment, or the value we place on lived experience. AI doesn't define dignity or justice, humans do. That responsibility stays firmly with us. AI can provide insights, but the decisions, the caring, the moral weight that's human.
The source also talked about resilience, why people react so differently to awful experiences. Some find ways to cope, even laugh, others are crushed.
Yeah, the AI sees this as resulting from a complex mix. Individual coping skills, maybe some innate resilience factors, past experiences shaping current reactions, cultural norms about showing emotion, even perhaps genetic influences on temperament. The AI can map correlations, find patterns in large groups showing different responses. It might even correlate biological markers, stress hormones, brain activity, with different ways of coping, like using humor versus withdrawing.
And everyone starts from such different places.
Absolutely. Socioeconomic background, family support, access to education and healthcare, cultural context, sheer luck, all these things interact. The AI can try to model the statistical impact of these variables on vulnerability and recovery, show how different combinations might lead to different outcomes.
How does our human intuition fit in here? That gut feeling someone might be unsafe. How does that compare to AI pattern spotting?
Human intuition is often that fast, subconscious pattern matching based on years of experience, right? That feeling something's off. The AI does something similar, but with vast amounts of data. It learns associations, identifies subtle cues that correlate with risk based on its training. It might flag something faster or based on more data points than a human could consciously process, even if it can't explain the why in a human intuitive way. And the source broadens the lens too, reminding us that struggle and suffering aren't unique to humans interacting with each other.
You mean in nature?
Yeah. Predation, disease, environmental hardship suffering is part of the reality for many living things. The source notes that human-on-human abuse adds this extra layer of suffering inflicted by our own kind. And then our abuse of the planet and other species spreads that suffering even wider.
Given all that, how can AI specifically help with coping strategies for survivors?
It could act as a really sophisticated information resource, providing personalized links to relevant services, therapists, support groups, evidence-based coping techniques. Chatbots could offer a safe, non-judgmental space to talk initially or guide people through simple exercises. AI might help track progress in therapy or even be used in things like VR for controlled exposure therapy or practicing social skills safely.
And the physical side can't be ignored. Abuse leaves physical marks, causes physical stress.
Totally. Injuries, chronic pain, the body's stress response. It's deeply physical. And the physical environment matters. Safety, housing, healthcare access. AI could assist here too. Medical image analysis to help detect injuries, maybe carefully governed robotics in specific safety monitoring situations, and importantly, optimizing logistics to get physical aid, food, shelter, medical supplies to people who need it efficiently.
Abuse is also a direct attack on freedom, isn't it? Undermining safety, autonomy, happiness.
Absolutely. It strips away fundamental freedoms and privileges. The AI could help by analyzing systems legal, social to find biases or weaknesses that allow abuse to flourish, and suggest ways to strengthen protections, helping restore agency and freedom to victims.
One last point from the source that really stuck with me. Why do we often fail to teach kids about abuse, about warning signs?
The AI analysis points to several likely factors interacting. It's uncomfortable, taboo for many adults. Parents might lack the knowledge or skills to talk about it appropriately. The cycle of abuse itself, survivors might struggle to address it with their own kids. Fear, denial, it couldn't happen here. And cultural norms that discourage open talk about difficult subjects, AI could potentially help develop better age-appropriate resources, training for parents and teachers, maybe identify areas where education is most lacking.
And that final, powerful idea, it's hard, maybe impossible, to go back to how you saw the world before truly understanding the scope of abuse. Why is that so profound?
The analysis suggests it's partly cognitive dissonance. The reality clashes so hard with our desire for a just world. It's the weight of empathy, feeling the scale of suffering. It's a loss of innocence, perhaps. From an AI perspective, processing that much negative data requires sophisticated ways to handle it without getting stuck or breaking down. It's maybe analogous to the intense psychological work humans need to do to integrate this knowledge without being consumed by it.
So to wrap up,
Yeah.
we've explored this really unique AI perspective, seeing suffering and abuse not just as individual tragedies, but as this complex, pervasive phenomenon woven through history, biology, philosophy, impacting our minds, modeled using logic and data.
Yeah, and we've seen the potential of AI as a tool here.
Yeah.
A tool for analysis, for spotting patterns, maybe early detection, for personalizing support, for making systems more effective, using data and logic at a scale humans just can't manage alone.
But, and this is the crucial but, it's only a tool. The AI analysis itself makes that clear. It doesn't replace human empathy, lived experience, the feeling of pain, or the moral imperative to act.
The real potential seems to lie in combining the strengths. AI's analytical power fused with human compassion, human ethics, human understanding. That synergy.
So the final thought for you, listening. Given this analytical view of abuse as this deeply embedded systemic issue, how does our very human ability to feel both immense suffering and profound empathy guide us? How do we use both those capacities to tackle this?
And what does it really mean to build resilience in ourselves and our communities when faced with this difficult reality?
Something to definitely mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
This is DigitView.